Hey, Antoine, I'm so excited to have some time with you today. Let me first introduce you and all your awesomeness to anybody who's watching this. This is Antuan Ramone. And if you know me well, you probably have heard me brag about having a friend in the play Hamilton. Well, this is the friend. Um, and of course, I'm incredibly proud about that accomplishment. Um, so, Antoine, first of all, how are you? How are you in New York?
I'm doing well overall. I'd say 98% of the time I'm in good spirits, and then a few dips and lulls here and there. But overall, wonderful place.
Yeah, totally get that. So I specifically invited you to have this conversation to talk about rejection. A little bit of a harsh topic, right? But I think we need to have this conversation because here I am writing this book for self-employed people, and we face a lot of rejection. And to be honest with you, I feel like I face more rejection now than ever because I'm that much more active in the speaking world. And I've realized how much speaking must be like performing. So when I thought about rejection, I thought, well, gee, who do I know in my world that probably knows more than anybody else about rejection? And I thought about you, and not because are someone who should be rejected, but the fact that you are a performer. So I guess my first question is, am I off base, or is it true that, as a performer, do you even know that you stepped into a profession so full of rejection, or does it not feel that way to you?
I did know that in the beginning, and I've been a performer professionally for over 20 years. And that has come with a lot of rejection. I moved to New York in February of 2006, and then I spent pretty much the next 5 to 6 weeks auditioning 5 days a week, sometimes going to 2 auditions a day. So that's about 30 auditions in the course of 6 weeks. And from those 30 auditions, I heard yes and got hired for 2 to 3 different jobs. So that's maybe 10%.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that. I'm such a math geek. I always look at the math of everything. And I'm kind of curious, has that formula stood up? 'Cause I wonder about that as speaking. It feels like I get one out of every 12 auditions, if you will, as a speaker. Have you ever established, is there a ratio? Have you ever noticed?
I have not personally, so I can't give any figures or statistics to that. But I used to, when I was auditioning more heavily before I started working with Hamilton, I started keeping an audition log of what the show was, the people attached to the show, the day. It started as a way to encourage myself to keep auditioning, because when you get used to hearing no over and over and over again, you think, I'm not good enough, I'll never work, or there are so many negative conversations that are had. But in having this journal, I could see I'm doing the work. I just have to keep showing up.
Okay, so I want to know more about that because you've just offered a tool, and that's kind of what I'm looking for. So explain that to me. So because that's one of my big questions. If as many of us are as business owners, we're in positions of facing a lot of rejection. And I do believe often what we need is a tool. So tell me more about how you journaled and how it helped you, because it almost seems like it wouldn't, it would almost seem like it would be depressing to know how many times you auditioned and didn't get chosen, if you will. So how did it work and how did it help you?
Well, first I want to say I can't take credit for the journal. It came from something that I read, and I wish I could remember the source of that to give the person the proper credit. But it was something I saw from a performer, and they said, or they were writing and just saying, this is a way so that it reminds you that you keep showing up, that you keep doing the work. And so it just shows that you're constantly in action, even though, and it also reminds you that I'm doing my part. All I can do is show up. If I don't show up, I am guaranteed to not get work.
Yep.
But if I do show up, then I've put forth effort in getting that work. And unfortunately, at the end of the day, it's up to the people casting the show. It's the people who are casting their talks or their conventions, if what you have to offer fits their need. But if you don't show up, they may not even know that what you have to offer is going to satisfy their need. Yeah. So that was the purpose.
Idea. So you journaled to know that you're putting in the work.
Absolutely.
Regardless of the outcome, but just knowing you're putting in the work. I think that's so important. I know, I literally have never had a job. I've been self-employed since 14, right? And have done various things. But when I get discouraged, the thing that picks me back up, or if I look at, I wonder if I should be, whenever I have those shoulds, like I should be in a better position in my life. I should be this, anytime I go into that place, what holds me up is remembering that I literally have made every dollar that has ever come into my pocket. And that is something to be proud of, right?
Absolutely.
Maybe I could have done something better with the dollars. Maybe I should have saved more of those dollars, all those shoulds. But the fact that I created every dollar I ever made that's actually, so in a way it's the same. I never journaled it, but it's kind of the same idea, like recognizing the work that you're putting the work in regardless of the outcome.
Absolutely.
I love that. All right. So now I have to ask you even the bigger question, like if you knew you were stepping into a profession full of rejection, why? Like, why do any of us, one of the things I point out in the book is that, every self-employed person I've ever asked, like why they became self-employed is because, I want to control my destiny. And I always say, well, how did that work out for you? Right?
That wasn't.
We realize that we want control over our lives and we step into a completely uncontrollable environment. Like it's literally insane. But we do it. So why would you step into a profession is full of rejection? Like what makes you do that?
For me, it wasn't about controlling my destiny. It was more about, this was something I was very passionate about doing. It was something that I knew I was good at. And I had enough belief and ignorance within myself to move forward. I had support of family and friends. I had support of educators. A lot of the jobs that I got probably within the first 5 years of my professional career, most of them were either a teacher or a music director or a choreographer referring me to the next job. Oh, did you think about auditioning for this theater? Or I have a friend that's casting this show. So I could not ignore the signs that were presented to me.
Yeah. So to you, there were signs, right? So there was you had this innate feeling this is what you're meant to do, regardless of the consequences that come with it.
Yeah, it was my passion. And I knew that I needed to follow it.
And what about applause, right? Applause can come in all different forms. Mm-hmm. I love competition shows. Like I watch all The Voice, American Idol, World of Dance is one of my favorites. Like I love competition TV shows. And I had to make the really difficult choice last night to either watch World of Dance or Golden Girls. And unfortunately, Golden Girls won out because
it's always, you can find that anywhere. It's on Hulu. Every season is on Hulu.
I know, but I probably watch 4 to 5 hours of the Golden Girls a day. Like there's 88 episodes. I know every one of them. And I know way more trivia about the Golden Girls than anybody should know. If you want to know why there's an explanation carved in the back of the front door, ask me. Like I know way too much.
I'm a huge fan as well, but you can watch the.
But I didn't watch World of Dance last night, but I've been so struck by the commercial leading up to the premiere, which was last night, which was something J-Lo said. She said there's something about, she's like, this is just the voiceover of the commercial. She says there's something about performing that we will be sick to our stomachs before we step on stage, but then afterwards we say to ourselves, I have the greatest life. And I know that as a speaker as well. So is there, and it's not just people, I don't know that people fully understand. It's not that you feed on the applause. It's that you've done something. Like, what is it? Like so if feeling like you had a purpose and and a passion, you had to do this, but what has strung you along as the dangling carrot, if you will, to stick with it for 20 years?
It was the first substantial way that one could feel a sense of power and strength. I grew up not feeling that in my social circles. At home, I didn't feel that I had a voice. I didn't feel that my physical space was enough to make a difference in the world. And stepping on stage and visibly seeing how people were responding to the performance I was giving within an ensemble, or if I had featured moments, to see that it really gave me a courage and a strength that even studying Taekwondo for 4 years did not give me. And so that was a large part of that for me, and has been a large part of that for me. One of the most powerful moments, I was working on a cruise ship, and I performed Proud Mary as Tina Turner in about a 10-pound beaded sequin get dress with 5-inch platform heels.
I need video.
I have it on DVD. And the first time I performed that for a full audience, the roar of applause almost knocked me over from my standing position. I had never experienced that before that moment.
Wow. So it was healing.
Absolutely.
Right? And this is, I'm curious because I've looked at this and I've asked this question many times. There are many speakers actually consider themselves to be introverts, as do I, right? Which seems completely contradictory, but I think there's always several reasons. One is, I think, I always say, well, introverts are so used to being in uncomfortable situations that this is just another uncomfortable situation. But it's also this paradox between needing to be seen, which is usually something, if they unpack it, that they didn't get, just as you had said earlier in life. And there's something, and I've never asked this of a performer, particularly Broadway performer. Like, is that prevalent in Broadway as well? Are many of the performers far more introverted than we might think?
Yes. And I have said many times that I'm an introvert existing in an extrovert life. I am okay being around large groups of people. I mean, I'm okay being in new circumstances and environments. However, where I find the most peace and comfort and what rejuvenates my spirit is time alone or time in small groups. I would much rather, like this with COVID happening, I'm in my apartment and I am so at peace, and it is giving me so much energy, and it is giving me just everything that I need that I have been missing, having been on the road for work for so long.
Yeah. It's fascinating because, I mean, there's so many dualities to it. I do think a lot of what to kind of unpack our conversation, right? What brought you into performing, as in the same way it brings many of us into business, is an innate feeling of you have no choice. This is something I must do. This is my purpose. This is my passion.
Yes.
And then you've introduced this wonderful tool of just recognizing the work, right? Celebrate the wins as well. I think that's always important. I try to save good reviews and accolades and things like that. I try to save them for, I call it a wow folder. So when I need that, I can go and read a wow. And so we need tools to bring us along. And then also the dangling carrot. I think a lot of us, whether performers or business owners, need to understand what is the dangling carrot that keeps us keep going. And I don't mean dangling carrot in any way in a negative form as it's often used, but in a positive form. Like, what is it, right? Is it those occasional wins that if you're in a high rejection business, they're pretty occasional. For most business owners, they're not quite as few and far between as they are in performing. But I know I've had to try to figure out more tools for myself as a speaker, because the more I elevated my speaking career, the more I realized there was more rejection. And I wasn't accustomed to that because I had a very, very isolated photography business and I wasn't rejected very often. Right. What else can you share with us, or would you share with us about ways that you've managed rejection, or what are your perspectives, or anything else in a final thought you want to share about rejection?
I have had a continual conversation with myself that only I can do what I can do. And I really try not to compare myself to someone else's abilities, their talents. I believe there's space for all of us. And I think another guiding light and guiding point for me is a missed opportunity leaves you open for another possibility. And so there have been jobs that I've wanted, there have been things I've wanted that I've gone for and I didn't get them. And I have had to say to myself, as much as I want this thing, it's not meant for me now, or it's not meant for me ever, but something else is meant for me. And I'm going to, like, now that that thing is off the table, it leaves space for what is waiting for me. Yeah. And that is something that I think each of us would benefit from reminding ourselves, because it's not a matter of you're not good. There are so many factors that go into why we will or won't get the next speaking gig, why we will or won't get the next audition. There's a list of things that the person bringing you in has to satisfy for themselves that we have no control over.
Exactly.
So come in.
That I think is such a key point, and I want to stress that, because I think what I love that you said is that you have talked to yourself so much to know that you are uniquely qualified for what you do. And every business owner needs to have that conversation too, to realize you're uniquely qualified for what you do. So what you don't get, what feels like a rejection, is a combination of so many elements that has to do with the other, really has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
Right. And the more you know that you're uniquely qualified, you then can let go. It's like, well, there's a host of other reasons why that didn't happen, why I didn't get that, why I was rejected from that. It's timing, circumstance. I mean, there's a million other reasons.
Exactly.
And I also love what you're saying about timing. And I actually spoke about this in Lingo, and I bring it up certainly in this book as well, because I think it's so important. You and I met at the TEDx stage originally. Yeah. And that was, I had been rejected 12 previous times, which I've talked about many times. I talk about it, I think, in my book, but I wrote the book 3 years ago. I can barely remember what I wrote in it. But I think it's in there, but I know I share the story often because I want to encourage other people. It's like 12 times over the course of 2 years. But what I will say, when I got the event I did in New York City, my hometown from which I had moved away from, you realize, oh my gosh, if I had gotten any of the previous 12 events, it wouldn't have been as meaningful as the one that I got.
Yeah, and you may not have been as prepared and in a space for yourself mentally and emotionally to show up the way you did for that event had it come sooner.
Yeah, and I wasn't. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I can look back the 2 years prior and think I wasn't ready. I thought I was, but the universe, thankfully, taking care of me, knew I wasn't. So often when we don't get what we think we want so much, in lingo we refer to as reciprocal communication, like we have to pay attention to whether, and this lesson came from the relationship from which I had walked away from several years ago after a 6-year relationship. The big learning lesson was, and I was relating it to a person, but it's just as true as goals, does what you want in life want you as much back?
Ooh, that's so true. And that's a question that I think a lot of us might be afraid to ask, because we don't.
Because we want, right? We want that win. We want that performance. We want that business win. And you have to ask yourself, but yeah, I'm just beating my head against the wall. Does what I want me back just as much? Does the person I want me back as much? Because boy, if there's one lesson I've learned about relationships is get the hell out of it. If you're in a relationship where what you want that person more than they want you, that's never going to feel good. But we have to pay attention to that so that we can realize that when the rejections come along, that, it's for many reasons and circumstances that weren't ours to own. It wasn't that we weren't good enough. It was timing. It was that person's needs. And I think that's a big way of healing from rejection as well.
I agree.
Awesome. Antuan, thank you for helping me with content for the book, really looking at rejection. Like I said, I've been thinking since I've stepped heavier into the speaking world, I've thought so much about you and performers, and just admire the resilience that I've often said that if I were to ever have 2 more kids, they would have been named Persistence and Resilience. Because I think they're everything. There are no more kids coming, but if I were to, that would be it, right? Because boy, we need that much, and you certainly represent that. And you've also had tremendous success. So congratulations to you on all your amazing success. You've been with Hamilton now for how long?
August will be 4 years.
4 years. And
it's in my 20 plus year career, this is the longest amount of time I have worked full time for any show.
Yeah. And I want to point out, I know your role as a universal swing, right? Which I think you wrote an article I read, or, universal swings are the backbones of Broadway, right? Because, and if I remember right, you have the ability to play up to 6 roles. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah,
which is ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so we have universal swings, which is what I'm one of, and that's an even smaller niche within a larger pool of people who are swings, and they are specific to one exact company, whereas I could go to several companies. So I'm doing a very niche job in an even more niche pool, like an even more niche job in a niche pool.
Crazy. It is crazy. I mean, it makes those performers who have to know one role look pretty insignificant in a way. When you actually have 6 roles you can step in. And I know I have many, many late nights when you're at the theater enjoyed our behind the scenes conversations while you're waiting to see whether you get called on or not, or in between scenes. So
Yeah.
it's a crazy life. I admire you greatly for it.
Thank you. And thank you for the invitation to have this interview with you. And
Awesome.
I'm so glad that I was able to participate.
Always good to catch up. So thank you.
Take care.
All right, you too.